In an explaining assignment to the need finding assignment, which is located on your e-classroom, need finding usability assignment, which is 10 marks basically on banner. Before we explain the contents of this assignment, which could either be worked in a team or in a group or by yourself, and of course you will need people in order for you to observe. You need to understand the whole concept of design for usability, which I'm just going to speak to you all very briefly about while I explain how to approach assignment. Well, assignment number 1 in this case, which is the need finding of the observational methods assignment, where I've also linked a YouTube channel where you could see a lot of examples that was designed and developed by students in the past. So you could always click on this particular link on YouTube, where previous class assignments, you could have an idea of what the need finding assignment would be. And of course you would have to use either a camcorder, or because I don't want it in written format, I would prefer to have it like in video format, something designed and so on. You understand, some people use PowerPoints and then do screen recording like what I'm doing here. Some people use camcorders, Adobe Central, and so on. Like in this case here with this need finding assignment, this was a very good one, hence the reason I put it to the top. There's others as well, but I couldn't find them, where they observe the use of a cellular phone in this case here. Alright, so we're going to begin our usability assessment, or design for usability. And we're going to begin by saying usability in terms of the whole concept of usability. We're going to be looking at how do you analyze the use of a product. Alright, so before we begin, let's take a pause for our course just now there. Again, this is the HCI group. If you haven't joined this group as yet, you're going to be posting most of your videos and stuff here, so it'll be easier for me to get and grade as well. So we're looking at the whole concept of design and usability. And when we're looking at that, we're basically looking at how do you analyze a product. You know, you detect, of course, you as the end user will have to detect usability problems and again propose solutions. As you can see, this guy here is probably being very angry looking at some software or something like that that is giving him some problems. Alright, so this is the whole concept of usability engineering, and of course you could always look on the e-classroom to look at some of the videos here in terms of the need finding usability playlist, and you're going to have a lot of videos here that is going to teach you a lot about the concept of usability before you actually attempt your assignment. Alright, so if you look at this slide, for example, in terms of the concept of usability, you know, some of the questions that will be asked is what is it and why do we need it, in terms of like when you're designing something. Like for example, you could see that this may just be usable just for, well, it's not really usable for anything because where the handle is located and the spouting is also located, so this is not really usable. And in terms of if you knock over a disk, you're going to realize that it may not be usable because of the how fragile a disk is now, and information could be lost very easily. So when you look at the user-centered design in terms of formative and summative evaluation, in terms of testing the concept of usability, some of these questions that may arrive, like what does it mean for something to be usable? So when you do your actual observational assessment, observing somebody who probably is unaware of a product, you know, some people observe stuff like smart TVs, PlayStations, and so on, and we get people who not really familiar with devices and so on, or those products, and then they ask certain questions in terms of whether or not, you know, if they had problems in terms of how usable or the learning curve, I should say, now in using these type of products and so on. So in some of these formative evaluations and usability testing as well, will be conducting an evaluation. So we'll be looking at interviews and so on, and how do you evaluate the whole concept of usability, whether or not if it's easy or is hard to use and so on. You know, it have some products that are very difficult and so on to use. So you as a user would have to analyze those products and so on as it goes by. Alright, usability, user behavior, understanding user behavior in this case. Of course, this is part of your formative evaluation. In terms of, you'll want to understand whether or not if the user would be frustrated while trying to you know, navigate whatever product or service or application that they are using in this case. Of course, you'll have to collect data in terms of data collection methods, and we're going to discuss that a little later down in the slide. And of course, you'll have to do some reporting in terms of the results. So right, so when we're looking at the user-centered design, and most things are more user-centered than teacher-centered approach. You're looking at some of the characteristics of these user-centered designs, and we're looking at the whole philosophical experience, or the philosophy of the experience of the individual who you'll be focusing on, or you'll be doing the observation on. Like for example, early and continuing focusing on users in terms of user-centered designs, empirical measurements in terms of direct observation of actual user, which you're going to be doing for your assignment. You're going to directly observe, taping that particular person, and sometimes it's best you probably use somebody who's extremely hasty, who may not want to take their time to learn the product and so on, because they have a number of individuals in society like that, and you'll have to design products that are very usable for these type of people. Alright, so you can look as well as the interactive process of the designs and what type of redesigns, and test those designs afterwards when you are doing HCI, especially when you're developing a product or service or something like that. Right, so again, we're going to get on in terms of the evaluations and formative evaluations, which I spoke about earlier, and then summative evaluations. Alright, like for example, when it talks about summative, we were looking at the actual ending of the final product. How did we do? How did the person do? In fact, when you evaluate the product, whether or not you should carry back the product, or you should suggest that the product should have a redesign or something like that, in terms of validating whether the product is usable or so on. Alright, and as well as observing and recording what the particular person is saying. As you can see in this Needfinding assignment, in this one here in particular, the person record how the person actually did in terms of how usable the product was now way back then. And then of course you'll have to make some recommendations after you analyze the particular person now. So you'll have to evaluate the person, and of course during your evaluation you will have to look for reviews, and some of these reviews could either be expert reviews. Like for example, if you buy a product on Amazon, you will go and look at some of the reviews to whether or not if the product was, what type of product it was, and if people really enjoy it, if they actually sell what was being sold and all this sort of stuff, if that was the type of product that it was advertised and so on. So you would want to go back and probably get some other people views and so on in terms of whether or not, if the product or not was basically something that was really good or very usable in this case here. And you can look at some of the other testing, because you will be doing most of the field testing as well when you are doing your evaluation of the testing and so on. Alright, of course you'll understand some of the problems in terms of your daily life. And let's take a look at some of these examples here for things. Like for example here, usable. How usable is this? This is very confusing. Stop sign, go left, go right, and so on. And so we're looking at the whole concept of what is usable or not. Alright, so this here, an example here may not be the correct. You could do an evaluation this, but you can see this is not very usable here in this case. This is a particular example of what is usable here. You could see that there's a walkover. Typically in Trinidad and Tobago, number of individuals don't really use the walkover. You can see some people here at the side trying to cross the street. So you have to understand that even though that there's something that is considered usable, why it is that people are not using it. Again, here we look at the whole concept here of development in terms of redesigns. You can see the difference between a Macintosh mouse versus a Windows-based mouse, and we have mouses now that are even more developed. So these have been redesigned over a period in time. Alright, you can look at some of these examples here in terms of these websites that are not very usable. Alright, very hard to understand. It's not really easy, a quick fix. So we know of course that some of these websites will need to redesign and so on. Alright, and when you're assessing the whole concept of usability and what is usable and what it means to be usable, you have to look at the ISO standards, the International Standards Organization. So you're going to have to tell me specifically what type of goal you're trying to achieve in your assignment here when you observe the person, whether or not if it is effective, if it's efficient, if it's extremely satisfying and so on. What in terms of his learning curve, is it easy to learn, and what about memorability too as well. So if you're supposed to look basically at your assignment 1 here, and this is a perfect example of one here. Basically the assignment will give you in detail what you really need to do. So the purpose of this assignment is to get you out observing how people interact with everyday devices. Could be applications, tools and software, trying to perform a well-defined task and to reflect on some devices are simple while others are very hard to use. So some of the things in the introduction you're going to put in your video presentation is like the device you observe, specific task it was used for. Briefly indicate if the system is hard or easy to the user. And of course, when you do your evaluation or the observing the person on the task, you would that some of those things would come out, and you of course going to report on it as well now. And some of the observational methods, you're going to look at what is the characteristic of the partisan. Do you observe whether or not if they, in terms of their learning curve, if they learn easily, if they're hasty, and so on. Nonetheless, as I was saying here, some of the observational methods in terms of the characteristics of the person, you observe whether or not the person is hasty, willing to learn, the ability to memorize stuff quickly, and so on. And how did you observe that person performing that selected task, which of course that will be answered by the fact that you actually did a video presentation or PowerPoint presentation of whatever you did. And what are some of the results that you have in terms of your observation of the user? And of course you'll have to make reference to like ISO standards and reviews and so on that you would have probably gotten from other people, you understand? Not necessarily have to tape those people. I mean, if you want, you could tape other people in terms of whatever device that you decide to use and so on. Alright, so this is a breakdown of the analysis here. What is expected of you? What is the aspect of tasks is easier or harder to complete? You'll have to answer this question: why and how, compare observation and conclusions to everyday objects. So you have to make reference to other objects and so on. Good and bad features and reasons. So it's like you're building a presentation for me, like a docudrama or something like that. These here is some of the examples that you could use. Of course, I would advise you to use the design briefs and your daily studies and so on. This is other further additional information that you could read towards your assignment in terms of observational assignment. But my best bet is for you to actually look at these videos here, get an idea, and if you have any problems at all, you could always go to the Facebook channel here, Human Interface Computer Interface Design, and you could post some of your thing. What I'm looking at basically is for you to really tape somebody using a product and see whether or not if the product is easy, probably a product that is new to somebody, like a smart TV or application software, Excel, but you have to tape that person doing it. Now be a little innovative when you're doing your assignment as well. This is Andre Cadogan. Thanks for taking in my Human and Computer Interface course, and we'll catch you on when we look at the next assignment, which is the website evaluation.